Wonderful. Well, good morning. I said good morning. Thank you for joining us on the last day of the Behavioral Health Tech Conference. We are so excited that you're in community with us, and we have such a great conversation planned. My name is Trace Terrell. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm a third-year public health student at Johns Hopkins University. Just so excited to be here. Today we're going to be talking about the really important role that entertainment and education, or more commonly known as edutainment, plays in reaching youth and young adult audiences about mental health. This comes in many forms: television shows, learning platforms, mental health apps, creative spaces, and more. Co-designed content between young people and adults is one of the most powerful and promising ways to prevent mental health crises among our children and adolescents. Creativity and the arts have always been the heart of the mental health movement. And it is something that I think most of us in this room are so familiar with. Who grew up watching Sesame Street? Raise your hands. And what about Mr. Rogers' House? Okay, I love the representation there. These shows have truly captivated the world for decades with their thoughtful messaging and engaged programming. In fact, before the election, I don't know if anyone knows this, but Sesame Street shared an Instagram post of the Cookie Monster with text that read, "It's okay to be anxious." Today we're going to be talking about what it is like for the next generation to have this sort of content. What does it actually mean for this to be there for them? And how can the arts and creativity continue to be used to empower these conversations, not just now, but as we go into the future? There should also be on the slide, if anyone would like to submit questions using the lower QR code. I have this fancy little iPad up here, and I'll see your questions as you populate them. But if anything comes up, we'll save some time at the end for that. If that's not working, we can do it the old school way, and we can stand up and we can use the mic station right there and there. I'm really excited to welcome these three incredible and phenomenal people to the stage. And would we like to start with you to do a quick introduction, Angela?
Yes. Hello? Oh, got it. Okay. Yes, I'd love to introduce myself. So my name is Angela. I'm currently a third-year university student at Wellesley College. I'm from California, the Bay Area, and I'm actually currently studying abroad at Oxford. So had to fly in here and do a little week trip. So I'm a student researcher. I work at the Wellesley Youth Media and Wellbeing Lab, and also the Stanford Psychophysiology Lab. And on the side, I'm also running a project called SoulSync, which is dedicated to Asian American mental health. I'm really excited to be here today and to have this conversation with such lovely people. Pass it on to you.
Hey everyone, my name is Gloria Imana. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and I get the privilege and opportunity of being the founder and CEO of a global mental health nonprofit called the Hope Booth, which is really fun. We get this really unique opportunity to remodel old telephone booths and turn them into these evidence-based, interactive, immersive experiences that spread hope, help people with mental health coping strategies, and then connect them to local help and support within a 5-mile radius. So that could look like cost-reduced therapy, shelter, food banks, whatever someone could need within their mental health journey. That's a little what we do, and it's a lot of fun.
Peace, everybody. My name is Andre Sims. Folks closest to me call me Day One. I run a nonprofit in Philadelphia called Day One, Not Day Two, where we work with young artists and we pay them to create high vibrational music, poetry, specifically like hip hop and rap to heal through creative expression and build narrative power. We're also building media platforms in North Philadelphia and using cultural organizing to transform the landscapes of power in our communities. So it's really a blessing. I'm grateful to be here with y'all.
Well, thank you all so much. And to start, I just want to acknowledge that there is a really complex relationship between technology and youth mental health. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but to just reiterate, Youth Voices have both advocated for expanded online safety and privacy protections, but also access to new technologies that promote diverse provider networks and culturally resonant services. How have each of you seen technology used to positively impact youth mental health, especially for marginalized communities?
I'd love to answer this question. And so with my work at the Youth Media and Wellbeing Lab, one of our projects is heavily involved in digital youth mental well-being. And so we, every year, every summer, we'll run a workshop with middle school students. And so we'll do a week where we teach them all about different aspects about social media and technology. And so some recent topics have been like algorithms and AI. But we also talk a lot about, social media influencers and body image and regulating your emotions. And so through these workshops, we've learned a lot about the youth and how media has influenced their lives. And I think often there's a very negative picture painted with social media and youth, and that it's very negative. And of course, there are a lot of negative aspects to it, but I think through our research, we found that it's very up to how they use it. And so there are a lot of positive ways that social media can be used. And so we've found that, especially with young people in marginalized communities, they find a lot of social support through social media, through following people that look like them and following causes that they care about, and also finding communities where they can talk to people about issues that they're going through or similar things that they care about. And this really positively impacts their lives. And so that's something that I've seen, I think something that I wish was talked about a little bit more.
That's really interesting, and I'm curious because I've heard a common thread throughout this conference is that youth agency isn't talked about enough, but it's the reason why young people are taking it into their own hands to support their mental health. They're unplugging from social media, they're deleting their accounts, or they're taking breaks or setting time limits themselves. How, as just sort of a follow-up question, like how receptive are young people to having these conversations? Like, I think there's this misconception that young people are just so addicted to social media and to these different platforms that they don't even want to talk about it. But from what you shared, it sounds like they're really wanting to practice youth agency. Is that resonant?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, youth are very aware that there are a lot of harms that can come with it. And so from what we found is that they're very open to learning about, hey, how can I make this experience more catered to what I need and what is positive for me? And so they've been very receptive to things where we've shared about, trying to base your feed more about things that you're looking for. And especially with like body positivity, how can we follow influencers that paint a positive picture for that? And so I think there is one aspect where, if it is really negative to the point that, they don't want to use it, then of course unplugging is like an option for that and something that they're willing to explore and talk about. But I think there's also a lot of openness from their end about learning ways to navigate using it healthily. So, not completely cutting all ties to social media, but how can we tailor it to our needs and use it in a positive, healthy way.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think that I've seen technology used for good in some really cool ways, mainly because technology is the work that I'm primarily committed to using and leveraging. And I think one of the main things that I felt was necessity when I started the Hope Booth was this reality that there wasn't a lot of resources that were accessible. Like, you had to have a phone. Like, we think about Calm, we think about Headspace. Not only do you have to have a phone, you have to have money. I don't even have those resources currently. And so I started to think about the person who doesn't have all of the different advantages that gives them access to some of these resources. And so that's when the concept of placement came to mind. I remember growing up, I know I don't look like it, but I saw telephone booths. Growing up, I would see them all throughout the city. And I thought to myself, if it were that easy to make a phone call, why isn't it that easy to access mental health support? It should be that simple. And so that's when we went on this extravagant adventure of what does it look like to make hope and help free and accessible for people. And so for us, we don't necessarily target youth specifically, but naturally you're going to target the youth and their entire demographic as well as their guardian or their parents. And a really cool story, we had a mom reach out to us about a couple months ago. We've got Hope booths installed around the world in different cities, in public places, schools, hospitals, prisons. And we had a mom reach out to us, and she said, my son, he's been struggling with mental health and suicidal ideation. We can't afford care, we can't afford therapy, but he walks to the Hope booth every single week. That's his form of therapy. And so I think about this reality of how do we use technology for good to genuinely impact people? And that means help coming to you. And so what is the beauty of having technology where we have to rely on someone in mental crisis, already going through such a hard, difficult time, of them having to go find help? That is so much work. And so the work of placement that I think is so important is, well, what does it look like when the help comes to find you? It just meets you wherever you are. You don't have to look up, where is support, where is help? You just stumble upon it at the mall. You stumble upon it when you're at a concert. You stumble upon it at school or at a hospital. It's just always there where you are. So I think that's the beauty of technology, is that we can bridge the divide and bridge the gap with placement in particular.
I love that because, truly, technology is place-based care for mental health, and I don't think we acknowledge that as much, but it really helps to meet young people where they're at. And I know when I was growing up, I'm from a really small rural town in Oregon, and technology was really the only way that I was able to connect with some of the services that I needed. And I was enrolled in telehealth for such a long time, in teletherapy, and it was so empowering for me. I wouldn't have had access to mental health support and resources otherwise. Andre, I'm curious, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, when I think about meeting people where we're at, I think about more than just the physical technology, right? I think about the cultural tools that we have. And when it comes to what we're doing, using music as a form of healing, as a form of, trauma treatment and therapy, you're really doing exactly that, meeting the folks where they're at. Therapy isn't accessible to so many people. I'm in Philadelphia. We're dealing with a large gun violence crisis. The numbers are down this year, but we're still struggling in that category. And there's a lot that young people are just carrying with them. And the young generation, this specific younger generation that we're talking about right now, lived through a pandemic. We're still exploring social media and how that's impacting young people in the most crucial years of their development. So there's so much that this younger generation is holding. And sometimes, talk therapy can feel overwhelming to folks who haven't ever been introduced to that. So the fact that we're able to work with folks using music, using creativity, using rap, poetry, really does exactly that. And when I think about the technological advancements that led us to this point, years ago, you needed thousands and thousands of dollars to be able to record a high-quality song or a high-quality video. And now, with the advancements of technology, you can really produce professional-level content, whether it's music, whether it's video, whatever you choose. It's like right in your pockets. It's in our phones. And so that access has changed so much when it comes to creativity, when it comes to creators, because a lot of times that's what's saving lives. Those outlets, having that ability to really just channel and express. Because in music and songs, we're talking about things that you don't necessarily feel comfortable about just speaking about openly. So when I think of meeting people where they're at, when I think about the access and the barriers, that's what's coming to mind. And I appreciate all of you for what y'all added.
You touch on such an important fact, and that is the cultural tools, right? The cultural shift that is happening, because we're seeing all sorts of industries start to talk about mental health in really new and profound ways. I mean, Inside Out 2 just came out recently, and now it's one of Disney's highest grossing films and one of the highest grossing films in the world, right? That's pretty incredible for a movie about the brain's emotions. And there's also, a new onset of apps like Calm and Headspace that are using sort of gamified features like streaks to get people to participate regularly, right? What's kind of exciting about this cultural shift, right? How can we continue to mobilize on this and make sure that creativity and technological innovation are really helping to drive this conversation forward and reach more youth audiences about mental health content?
I can start off. I love the fact that we're reimagining what it means to treat mental health, what it means to talk about mental health, what it means to get services and have access to services, right? Just the fact that you can get that from Inside Out too, right? And it's a movie about the brain, and so many young people love it, compared to the past and how inaccessible it was. And so when I think of the ability that we have today, the opportunity that we have today to use art, to use culture, to use entertainment, to reach, younger populations, like we really need to like cultivate the spaces and the funding too, to really pour into this. A lot of times, content, entertainment, it gets put in this box of, oh, this is like arts and crafts, arts and culture. It's not as serious. No, this is the prevention. This is the intervention. This is the work. This is policy change. This is where it starts. Something that we do a lot of times when we go into the room, I'm going to do it now. For the young people in the room, how many people have a top 5 list of their favorite politicians? By a show of hands, who has top 5 favorite politicians? Now, who has a list of their top 5 favorite artists? You see how influential that is? And like we really need to start pouring into that and investing it, because music, culture, art, that is the change that is really going to set the tone for the policy, for the structures, for the resources. So, yeah.
I'll piggyback off of that. I love everything you just said. I think sometimes we have to realize that the extremity of our problem has to match the extremity of our solution. And so when we look at the extremity of the mental health issue, if we're only coming at it from one angle, we are missing so many opportunities. And so what I love even about this panel, we do very different things. And it is very needed that you stay in the lane you're in, I stay in the lane I'm in, you stay in the lane you're in, and each one of you also stay in the lane that you're in, because you're going to impact people that I will never have the opportunity to impact. You're going to impact people that she's never going to have the opportunity to impact. And I think that's the beauty of diversity, but also when we realize we are fighting for the same common good and the same common cause. We are not in competition. There's actually a collaboration that's desperately needed. And so I really love just the idea of arts and entertainment. I think that's one facet, but then you, with the work that you've done with MTV and what you shared of how they've entered into the White House and all of these really incredible opportunities in different facets that's helping solve the problem, push the needle a little bit further, especially when I think about the older generation, the boomers in the room, I salute you guys. There are things that you pay attention to that our generation doesn't pay attention to. You guys are a little bit more leaned in into certain atmospheres. And so growing up as a Nigerian American, my parents didn't even recognize mental health was a thing. Like it wasn't even a conversation, but it finally got their attention when our churches started talking about it. And then it finally got my peers' attention when politics started talking about it. And then so I think all of this is just really beautiful when we can find different ways to leverage the multifaceted approach and solutions.
Yeah, you're so right. And I'm reminded of other examples in our lives where cultural shifts have really driven change. I mean, can we talk about the impact that like teen pregnancy shows on MTV had on actually decreasing rates of teen pregnancy across the country, right? MTV was so highly criticized for when they were among the first people to actually air that on television, but it actually helped promote so many conversations about this really important public health problem that people simply weren't talking about, right? It's so cool when in the entertainment industry or social media kind of steps up to the plate and actually starts to talk about issues that its users and its consumers are actually facing. Do you have anything to add?
I really like what you said about how, by staying in our own lanes and the different communities that we're all connected to, we can reach different areas. But I really like how you touched on how we're all fighting for the same thing and that we all care about the same thing. And so I really like how collaborative this conference has been, because yes, we're all striving for the best in our own different areas in our in the context of mental health, but we're all fighting for the same thing, and we're not necessarily competing against each other, but all trying to do the best that we can do for the people. And so I really like what you touched on that. Yeah.
Let's talk about those lanes, because now I'm really curious. What exactly is the work that you do? What impact has it had, and sort of what's coming up for you in the future?
So yeah, I guess I'll start. I already talked about what we're doing with music, using music and culture to organize and also treat mental health. But recently, we were able to partner through the White House Youth Policy Summit just happened, and after that, there was a pool fund that came out, and we were able to partner with the Department of Education and the Department of Justice to do Youth Justice Action Month tour. That was in October, so we were able to go across the country, 4 different cities, and use cultural activations to challenge narratives around youth justice, around how we deal with harm, around community-centered alternatives. And it was a youth-led event, so we're working with young people who've been systems impacted, whether it be the criminal legal system or the welfare system, and they're using art to really communicate policy change with the Department of Justice, the Department of Education, and I was honored just to be part of it, just to be in it and experience, let alone being able to be part of the organization of it. And so when you talk about what's next, we're looking to see how we can plant seeds and scale that, because something that came up were 2 things that I want to point out. First, when we're talking about mental health, there's a conversation that we're not having, because there's a lot of folks who don't have access to even get diagnosed. And what happens in those cases is that those maladaptive behaviors become crimes, and they end up in juvenile detention centers, they end up in prisons. I was impacted by the criminal legal system at 14, 17, changed my life irrevocably. And so when we're having these conversations in DC and Chicago and Vegas and Philly, we're seeing that come up time and time again. People are being punished for what is really symptoms of mental health issues, when treatment can solve so much, when prevention and investing in community-centered alternatives can solve so much. And something else that stood out in all of these areas is that they don't have access to the community-centered alternatives that we're changing in the most marginalized areas. And so as we're scaling, we're looking to see how we can plant seeds in each of these areas and make healing cool. How can we make, how can we destigmatize mental health and, make that trend? How can we really transform the paradigms around that? And so thank you for asking that. And if anybody wants to support, come talk to me afterwards.
Can we get a round of applause for that? Because that is some incredible work. And I'm really curious too, because it sounds like you're one of the only organizations to be going into communities and offering this, where we know there are historic budget cuts for creative arts programs, where creative writing classes are just being struck down because they're not necessarily valued as other subjects, but we can see that they're so healing. I'm curious, when you go into these communities, are people really welcoming of it? Does it take a little bit to kind of build relationships or partnerships to kind of make sure that it is successful, or are people just really excited to get onto it?
So first, there's definitely an adjustment. There's a paradigm shift that has to happen, because we go into neighborhoods, we don't just pull up and partner with organizations, we canvas. We're going into communities, knocking on doors, asking people, what are the biggest needs for youth in your area? We're starting those conversations. And then once we actually get to the event stage, the activations, people are a little bit skeptical. How is art, especially people who don't consider themselves artists? I believe we're all artists and creators, that's just, something that we all have the capacity to tap into. And so it takes a little bit for, folks who don't see themselves that way to kind of switch that, flip that switch on. But once it happens, you could just see something click. And we kind of felt bad leaving, because it's we activated these areas and everybody's so charged up, and they're like, what's next? When are y'all coming back? And it's
When that funding piece comes in.
That's where the funding piece comes in. And so we're determined to make that the norm now, because it shouldn't be something that just happens once a year. It should be something that people have access to on the regular.
Thank you for that.
I'll go. I think sometimes what can be somewhat discouraging is the reality that nothing changes if policy doesn't change. So it's we can have all of these conversations, we can do all of these different things, but we know deep in our hearts, policy has to change to really emphasize the work that we're doing. And so I think one of the things that encourages me deeply about the work that we do is we're very data-driven. We love numbers, because I think something that's very important for me is that the work we are doing is not just impressive, but it's impactful. And sometimes with young people, we have this concept of if something's impressive, we're good. But I'm like, well, if we're trying to really push the needle, we have to ensure it's impactful. And so data helps us prove that. And so when we install a Hope booth into a neighborhood, we have the ability to see quite a good bit of data to put a pulse on a community, to know what is the need, what is the mental health climate of this community, what's the demographic. And so we actually can give that to our city council officials. We can give that and say, you don't have to keep doing this guesswork of where people are or where your community is or what needs resources, but we can easily say this is what people need and here's how you can help them. And so for us, I think one of the biggest things that matters is as we're getting Hope booths placed in the right places, the right communities, being able to metricize all of this data so that we can actually make real change, sustainable change. And so that's something that's been really helpful for us, and we have this really large, audacious goal over the next year to install 100 Hope booths around the world. We have them in both Spanish and English currently. We'd love to add Korean. I think that'd be something that's very necessary, especially in the communities we're in now. And so yeah, that's a little of the work we do, just really trying to make Hope and Help accessible for people and making it as free as we can. And the only way we do that is by supporters and funders. And so even when it comes to the divide with funding for organizations led by minorities, really wanting to see more opportunities there for us as well.
That is absolutely incredible. Yeah, applause, applause. Absolutely incredible.
We need a Hope booth in Philly. Like, we definitely need you in Philly.
It reminded me of the keynote that Paris Hilton gave yesterday, because I remember when I was little, I was watching her on a farm, trying to like navigate life there, and now she's passed 10 state laws banning, abusive care facilities for young people who are labeled as troubled, right? And so it really just shows that like culture comes first and change follows afterward, right? That policy change especially, right? When we have an agreement in our culture that something needs to change, policymakers usually follow suit. So thank you. And that data-driven piece, of course, is so essential, because like the culture shares the stories, and the data kind of just underscores how needed it seriously is. And I'm curious, because you have an app, right? And it's like you're collecting so much data, you're doing these workshops to kind of get feedback on it. How has it been going overall so far?
So for the research that I do at the Youth Media and Wellbeing Lab, a lot of the impact comes from kind of reaching out to these communities and organizations that have already been in place. And I think that's kind of touching back into how there's a lot of these communities or people that are working in communities, and I think working together to reach out to people that already have access to people in their own communities, to kind of bring them together to something like the workshops that we host also really helps with increasing impact and reaching people who need things like our workshop. And so that's kind of something that we've been navigating a lot, is reaching out. So I go to Wellesley College, so we reach out to a lot of people in Massachusetts, but also New York. And so the workshop is all online, so that's also something that we've been doing to try to increase accessibility and have physical location and transportation not be an issue. And so I think that's also something that I want to kind of employ in my own project with Asian American Health, is reaching out to organizations that already are tapped into these communities and learning from them, and collaborating with them to see how we can increase our impact and reach as many people as we can. And yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And to just share one example from my own life, I last year had the opportunity to work with Active Minds, one of the nation's leading nonprofit organizations for young people, and Showtime MTV Entertainment Studios on the development of a global multimedia social impact initiative called ASK, Acknowledge, Support, Keep in Touch. We're calling it the new Stop, Drop, and Roll for how to help a friend in need, because we realize that by and large, young people are turning to other young people first when they're stressed, when they're depressed, when they're going through a mental health crisis. And so we decided we need a training that is bite-sized, right? Because there's QPR and there's Safe Talk and there's, Assist, but those are like multi-hour long trainings. And I can tell you right now, no young person is going in there willingly to just sit in and kind of learn this really important gatekeeper information. So we decided, okay, how can we bring it online and how can we make it really resonant to young people? And so we decided the best way to do that was to go onto YouTube, right, which is the most used social media platform among young people. And our digital product was basically a animated video that depicts two characters. There's Charlie and there's Luna, and you assume the role of Charlie, and you're trying to support Luna as they are trying to get a new job. And Luna is really, really stressed. And so it's really meant to kind of take you through this scenario, uses, elements of like visualization and thinking ahead of how to like actually support someone in that time. And it gives 3 actionable steps to do that, right? Acknowledging their emotions, the experience that they're going through, not trying to solve it right away because acknowledging is so, so important. And then figuring out how to support them in a way that makes sense. Sometimes that is, offering to go with them to find, a mental health professional, or sometimes it's just asking, I am not really sure what I can do right now, but I want to be here for you. What is that? What can I do? Like, do you just need me to listen? Do you need me to talk? Do you need me to brainstorm with you? And the third element is really important, keep in touch. Because we don't often talk about that, but after you have a really emotional conversation with someone, it kind of sucks to ghost them afterward, right? I'm sure we've all had instances like that in our own life where we've been really vulnerable and then that conversation has never been circled back to. And so this digital product basically takes a young person who might be trying to do that same sort of method in their own life. They have a person that they're wanting to support. It helps them directly learn the basic skills to do that, right? It's a skills-based training that is really interactive. It's, animated. It really emphasizes, diversity and just being present with your friends in a way that isn't so clinical, right? Because I think that is also a really big thing in the mental health field, is just, even with the topic of like peer support, right? We're kind of pathologizing it and making it, something that's kind of getting away from its roots. So that digital product was really amazing to produce. We also made an interactive website as well that kind of goes deeper into content for people who want to learn more. And then we had a whole series of in-person, we called them Ask-tivations, you can see the pun there, a whole series of Ask-tivations where we went to different college campuses in the Active Minds network, and we provided them with friendship bracelet making material to engage with each other in a way that was really low-key, really stress-free, but to still be present with each other in the work that they were doing. And that was so important and so successful. And kind of the third arm of this whole entire project was going online, going to social media, and finding those trusted networks, those trusted messengers who can actually communicate this content to young people, right? So we partnered with 30 influencers and celebrities, and also with some of the shows in the Paramount Global Family Network. And so some of them were like RuPaul's Drag Race, some of the queens from there from different seasons. We also went to Solomon Thomas, who I think is in the NFL. Anyone check me on that? Yes? Thank you. We also went to the Dare. That's like the new band that everyone was for Halloween, the little suit. Yeah, everyone was that. And so we went to these people that young people are already kind of really engaged with. They're following their content, and we gave them basically a influencer toolkit to say, we know your audience is talking about mental health and they want to come back for that content. Here's how to share Ask, a really easy 3-step process for how to support a friend in need, and how to do that in a way that makes sense for your audience, right? Because that drives engagement for them, and it also teaches young people really essential skills. And so it was a really amazing project. I had the opportunity to work with my close friend and colleague, Alyssa Garza, right there. Yes, everyone point and stare. But yeah, if you're curious about learning any more about that, we'd be happy to connect afterward. And I think we're ready for open Q&A, right? Okay, so you can use the second QR code, I believe. That looks like it says something questions. I have a check. Yeah, second QR code. So you can use the second QR code, and by the time I figure out how to open up this iPad, I hope to see many questions that we can draw from. But please feel free to do that. I think there might also be some QR codes of the Hope booth and Ask that people can scan into if there is another slide for this. If not, it might be in the session key takeaways. Oh, no, it's right there. Oh, perfect. If anyone wants to try out the YouTube video while they're here, you can scan the one on the oh guys, my directions are so bad. I think it's the right or the left. And then you can go to the Hope booth and the one right there too, and right next to it. Okay, awesome. Does anyone else have any other comments while I'm trying to like navigate into this iPad?
I just want to say I really love how each of us are doing such different work and how we're kind of all meeting the youth where they are in different ways. And I just think it's so beautiful and really like hopeful to hear all the work that's being done. And it makes me excited for the future. And, yeah.
Awesome. Well, we have our first question, and it is, where do you think tech education is heading? Tech education. In the work that I do, I think it's headed in a really good direction, right? We have a lot of design principles that we know really work for communicating mental health content to young people, and so I think that is really exciting. And I think one of the things that we've really, haven't mentioned explicitly, but really emphasized throughout this panel is the importance of having young people at the table, right? We are all young people who were informing the development of these projects or leading them ourselves. And so if we don't have young people at the table, then it is really hard to actually make content that resonates with young people, right? It sounds too simple, but it's often something that we forget to do, right? That too many adults forget to do, not to hate. But yeah, is there like any other thing on like the youth engagement piece that's really kind of critical for you? Why is it so important that young people are the ones helping to develop these sorts of digital content or these creative spaces or things like that?
Well, I'll tie both together when it comes to what tech is actually, where it's headed, what tech education is headed. I have a less optimistic point of view. Because we're progressing technologically, right? There's so much more just tools at our disposal, but I feel like culturally, morally, we're disconnected. We're disconnected from each other. Social media was something that was supposed to bring the world together, and yet in our own communities, we're strangers. And so I don't think it's, completely bleak, but I do believe that we have an opportunity now to change that. And we have to start not only investing in the technological advances, but also invest in community, in people, in the actual resources that are right here in this room, the people next to us, the people that we hold dear to us. And when it comes to youth engagement, this isn't something like a lot of people want to just hire an influencer or bring on youth to create products and content. It can't just start there. You have to engage young people at every phase of the process. If you're an organization or a company that's looking to, build for young people or your target audience are youth, there should be youth at every phase of your production, and not just like the social media influencers, but where's the youth on your board? Where are the youth executives? Where are the young people that are really, helping to guide the strategy and leadership? That is critical. And so part of what we also do for companies, we do authentic youth engagement trainings. And when we do these trainings, the first thing we tell people is you have to seek to understand before you're understood. The reason why you bring youth to the table is because we're used to being talked at so much. Like you need to listen. And so when you're bringing young people in, make sure that you have a space to cultivate what authentic youth leadership looks like. And that means listening. That means seeking to understand. That means really allowing that leadership to flourish and to thrive. There can't be anything about us without us. So that's definitely crucial when it comes to bringing young people in and having them develop products, technology. Like you have to really think holistically about that process.
I think a thought that comes to mind with tech and education is it can go really well, but it can also go really south. I think we have to be really, really careful because you can go on TikTok and have juxtaposing verified information given to you. I remember even just one day, I needed to know how long can I keep this kimchi in my fridge before it goes bad. I Googled it, and 2 responses right under each other. The first one said, must trash within 7 days. The other one said, can be kept in the fridge for 180 days. I said, which one? Like, I will eat this and either die or I'm just gonna waste my money. Which one? And so I think we have to be a little bit more robust in the vetting process. And this is where it gets hard with social media, because everyone is an expert that never went to school. And I'm just like, well, who is the person we can trust and rely on? And so even with the work we do, our entire team is millennial, Gen Z, and that wasn't on purpose, but we also knew we wanted to get experts, true experts in the work that we do, because even without the intentionality of it, we can damage people. We can damage people with our own creativity. We can damage people if we don't have experts. Like Simone here is on my science board. We have neurologists and psychologists and therapists who are committed to this work at all costs, who can come behind us and say, hey, let's course correct. Let's change this. Let's not do it this way or that way. So I think it can go really great if we're inclusive and bringing the right people in the room and giving authority to the right people as well. But it can be damaging if we're not careful as well.
Definitely.
What was the answer to that question? How long can you keep it in?
I trashed it. I don't know. I couldn't gamble.
Any thoughts on sort of the social media piece and how we can make sure that like credible information is actually getting to young people, especially about mental health content, right? This is serious. This is something that we want to be accurate about, and something that is so important. So any additional thoughts there?
I definitely think one part of it is just equipping young people with the tools to be able to spot what is credible and what is not on their own, because obviously you can't be with them all the time and, you know, hold their hand and tell them everything that is right and wrong and good or bad, true or false. And so I think a big part of what our lab does is, you know, giving them the skills so that they can go out in the world and navigate it for themselves. And obviously, you know, there's hiccups along the way. You know, the world of social media is this vast place with so much misinformation that could be spread. And so, of course, like, harm is not 100% mitigable, but I think with equipping them and trusting them that they have the knowledge and ability to know things for themselves to be positive or negative for them, you're uplifting them with also having more confidence in themselves to navigate such complex places. But I think that's one key part to help keep education from going south, is by, you know, equipping people with the skills, because there's really no way to make sure everything is verified and really true. So I do think that's like a key part to keep things going in a positive way.
So true. I see we have a question in the audience. Yeah, there is a mic over there, but if you think, okay, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I know we are about close to time, so we'll do quick answers here, but I don't think we can necessarily forget about the tech and the role that it plays in fostering in-person relationships, right? With Ask, if you go onto the website and you make it through the entire chapter, we have a calendar pop-up that will sync to your calendar, and it says, check in with a friend. Check in with a friend. That's one practical step people can take to actually get engaged. I'm curious, does anyone else have brief kind of comments to this?
Just briefly, I'll add like those activations that I told you when it comes to using art and poetry and, just culture to bring people together. The technology is a vehicle, but it's not the only vehicle. Art, creativity, that's a universal language, and we use it to get people in the room, to start the conversation. And so I agree with everything that you said. Like, we cannot, take that part for granted. We have to invest in people.
I'll say really quick too, I love what you just said. One of the things that we do at the end of the Hope Booth experience, we ask people, do you have community? Yes or no? And if they don't, one of the things we've established is building in-person communities called Never Alone Community. That's established in a few different cities, really with the goal of helping people make friends and connect with one another. And we've been doing that in partnership with Hinge. And I think just like the beauty and power of getting people from point A to point B. So you got here, you got the hope that you needed, but now let's get you the help that you need. And sometimes the help is not predicated on a chemical imbalance. Sometimes the help is I need a friend, or I need a bed, or I need a warm meal. And so I think that's the beauty of one, community support, but then also connecting people to people as well.
Yeah, I think what you said about, we can't forget about the role that technology does have. And of course, it's not the same to interact with someone online compared to in person. But I think especially for people in marginalized communities where they don't have that connection in person, this is their opportunity to still access to communities and people and support where they wouldn't be able to have it if they didn't have technology. And I think that's something that we definitely see in our work at our lab a lot. Just want to keep my answer short.
Yeah, I love this idea. How can we use technology as a warm handoff to in-person connections, right? Because I remember growing up in my rural community, and I was, one of the only gay kids out there. Technology was what introduced me to some of my closest friends then, and it's how I was able to go meet them in person afterwards. So that is the conclusion of our amazing panel. Can we give a huge round of applause to these incredible people? Oh my goodness. If you're interested in learning more, connecting with our work, I think we can hang around for a few minutes, but thank you again for attending and for being present with us. Thank you.